All that being said, I want to introduce our invoicing supervisor, Carla, who's ready to go. And Carla, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Carla Marcano. I am the invoicing manager over at Supply Chain Management, Accounts Payable Invoicing. With me also is Marina Sadiq, who is the invoicing lead. I am going to start off with the presentation for some slides of information, and then we'll have our questions and answers at the end. So I just ask, as we're going through the slides, that you save your questions. You can put them into the chat, and we'll get to them and address them afterwards. Everyone okay with that? Great. So let's begin. So welcome to our very first Invoicing Forum. My name is Carla Marcano. Our agenda for today is we're going to do introductions. Let's freeze for a second. There we go. We'll go from slide to slide. One, I'm Carla Marcano. Inside this is our Invoicing Forum. Here's the agenda that we're going to cover today. We started with our introductions of who I am and Marina Sadiq, the lead. We're going to talk about some goals that we want to discuss today for invoicing, talk about our survey results, open it up for questions and answers, and then looking ahead of what it is that we will be doing as we collaborate and move forward. Part of the goals also is to talk about the work that we do, options that are out there, how we respond back, how to reach us, and things that will be implemented into the future. So, as we know, all of us, we will be moving to Aggie Enterprise January 2024. And with that change, invoicing unit will be 100% centralized. What that means is right now, how you're able to process invoices, you will not be able to do so. Invoices will be submitted, continual link that you send their invoices to, invoicing@ucdavis.edu, and it'll be implemented, uploaded into our Oracle system, and the AP processors will be processing all invoices. With that, we understand there's some concern that that's being taken away from the departments and it's falling all on AP. So with that comes the means of how can we serve the needs of you, our customers, and build better relationships than what we currently have. So let's start at the beginning stage. You have an invoice. What does your invoice need? So at the very basic, your invoice comes in. It has to have the vendor name. It has to have an invoice date, the description of services or goods that it's being paid for. It'll identify how many items you've purchased, what that item is, what that price is, and the total amount of the invoice. It should also have an invoice number. That's the core of what should be on an invoice. Now, as we're moving into invoicing being centralized, there's two types of invoices, a PO invoice and a non-PO invoice. For the PO invoice, which is what we predominantly process current day on a prereq, it must have the same thing that we stated on an invoice, but it should also have the valid purchase order number on it and identify the payment terms of what's going to be paid. For the non-PO, as we're moving into Oracle, there will be a non-PO form on our supply chain website that will need to be completed. All areas of the field needs to be completed, and it should be submitted either to invoicing@ucdavis.edu, not if, all non-PO forms will be submitted to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. However, at the bottom of the form, you have the option to submit or save as. If you submit, it opens up, you send it to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. Save as would be if you use your top page as the non-PO form and any supporting documentation that needs to be added to the attachment. One PDF with all documents is how the form needs to be submitted to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. If you connect your form and you put the form, and then you add supporting documentation, each PDF file will come into Oracle as a separate documentation. So if you have multiple pages that you need to include to the non-PO form, it has to be one PDF file. So let's recap. PO and non-PO invoice. What's the difference? Both of them, PO invoices can either come into invoicing@ucdavis.edu from the department or from the vendor. They send it to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. It will populate into Oracle. The invoice AP team will review and submit the invoice for payment. Kind of similar to what's being done today. Non-PO is the change where the non-PO form, the department, non-PO invoices won't be mailed in. The department will send it via email. Everything is one PDF attachment sent to invoicing@ucdavis.edu, and that goes into Oracle. Invoice team reviews, processes for payment. So one of the major questions that keeps coming about is, what do you have to do to have your invoice paid? At the very basic level, for a PO invoice, you must start with setting up your requisition correctly, which then updates your PO. Requisition creates the PO. I know that not everyone has this option. However, if you can, work with your vendors on their invoice submissions. That way, there's no disconnect or questions. Your PO line should state what the invoice is billing, so that will be processed. Again, submit your invoice to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. PO or non-PO information completed.
I'd just like to share. In the chat, we have a couple of questions, Carla. We could address these questions when we have the Q&A at the end, if that works.
Either or. I would prefer that we go through, but if it's something that you just want to ask now, I can answer it.
Okay, so we have a question. When would a non-PO be used instead of a PO?
A non-PO is the equivalent to current day disbursement voucher. So when you look in KFS for a disbursement voucher, you are paying a DV for an honorarium, for a license. It's for services that you have not set up a PO to pay that particular invoice.
Right.
There is a size, I'm sorry.
No,
Did I hear something?
you see that question? Is there a size limit to the PDF we would attach?
There is, and is Mary online? Mary Jackson, there is a line, a limit of what it should be.
We'll make note of that.
And circle back to give you that answer. I want to say, let me not give the wrong number. Let me find it and know exactly so I tell you correctly.
Okay.
Any other questions to address now?
I think that we're good right now.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, here's an example of an email that's sent back from an anonymous email to people or a person that an invoice was submitted in and we weren't able to process it. Again, it comes from an anonymous email, and I want to point out at the bottom where it mentions, please do not respond to this email as it's unmonitored. I take it that most people don't scroll down. That's why I put it in red so that it could highlight for you to see. The anonymous email is just a means for us to send out a response to the department to let them know, and to the vendor, that your invoice is missing something. And so here's just a sample email that's usually sent back that's telling the person, unfortunately, we couldn't pay this particular invoice. We're saying, in this case, it didn't have sufficient funds. We're asking you to amend your PO. And then once you've amended it and it's in final status, to submit it back to invoicing@ucdavis.edu for processing. the final line states, if you have questions regarding the email or other inquiries, please contact aphelp@ucdavis.edu. Major points to take away from that is aphelp@ucdavis.edu is your means to be able to reach to us. More to come for the future, but keep in mind that email address is your means for questions to address that you want to have based on receiving this response. Second takeaway, please, please, please resubmit the invoice. Once we've tried to process the invoice and we were not able to do so, the reason we're sending it back to you to make the changes is so that it can be done, but that case has been closed. We need the invoice to come back again so it can be processed. Let me see a question. Neither system. aphelp@ucdavis.edu. I am one of the people that responds to that. You do get a response. You get a case number when you send your message. And then from there, there's usually a response for the ticket. Whatever your question was that you wrote, it's usually answered from that when it comes back. If we have to resubmit an invoice to invoicing, does it go to the bottom of the queue again? Yeah, it's first in, first out. What is an approximate turnaround time for the invoice to get paid? So we like to say 3 to 5 days, but do keep in mind this, have a little grace. In the beginning, as we move into Oracle, we're all new. We're all starting for it. Yes, we've had some practice. Yes, we're testing, but there will still be some challenges as we're still overcoming and learning from it. So our goal, by all means, is to try to stay 3 to 5, if not better than that, as it gets submitted to our Q&C. So I'll say 3 to 5 days. Keep in mind for Oracle invoices that are submitted, once you submit them, you can check manage invoices and check to see the status of your invoice. The status also includes uploading it. So even though you just sent your invoice and it hasn't been processed, you could check that way to see what's happened to it. So that'll be a change from what we currently have when your invoices are submitted to invoicing@ucdavis.edu. What happens when the invoice has the incorrect tax rate due to either the RD or just a misunderstanding on what the tax rates are? So tax rates are calculated based on the ship to. So at that point, we will be amending based on the ship to. We will never pay the vendor more than what they're asking for, but your requisition and your PO, if there is a reduced tax rate, the PO will reflect that, and that is the amount that will be paid. What happens when the vendor's automated system sends your automated system an invoice with no PO? At that point, it's returned back to the vendor. We return it back to the vendor and we let them know to contact the person who's placed the order to obtain a valid PO number. We can't process it. If there's information on the invoice, that you're able to find out, they've listed your name. I try to search in the department. I try to search on the address to see if it's something that we can move along to help it go to someone actually on campus, but more times than not, it's going back to the vendor so that they can obtain the correct valid PO number. That is the requirement. Once you place the order and you set it up with the vendor to give them the valid PO number to list on their invoice. Can you submit multiple invoices for the same vendor in one email, or do they need to be emailed separately? Nope. So I've been testing. I submit like 20 invoices for different vendors, some of them even same vendors. It just has to be one. Each PDF file has to be one file for that submission. So if the invoice has like 12 pages, attach them, combine them all as one file, as one PDF, and connect that to your email, invoicing@ucdavis.edu, and then you can add other invoices, other PDF files to the submission. Will departments still be able to process DVs? No, 100% centralized means 100% centralized. AP will be the only department processing invoices.
Carla,
Yes.
Mary responded, it's a 5 gigabyte file size.
5 gigabytes. Thank you. Oh, see, I was going to lie and say 10. 5 gigabytes it is. Okay. So, any other questions before we move into our survey results? One question. Yes, there are 3 above. Okay. Is there a threshold for sending back invoices or insufficient funds within 5 to 10% of the P amount? It's not 5 to 10%. It's $100 over the amount of the full invoice. Please keep in mind, though, that is just like we have that threshold to pay, but ideally your PO should be set up to exactly what is being ordered and paid for that PO. The non-PO, it's the information that you complete on the form. We're entering that information to be processed. I'm speaking in particular for the PO invoices. Your PO should reflect what's being billed from the invoice, from the vendor on that invoice. If the invoice has additional information, you're not going to, additional charges, you're going to get that invoice returned to you. Do you know how partial prepays are going to be handled? For example, 20% down, then another 30%, another 30%, and then a final 10%. So there is no prepayment per se of when we're processing. We'll be processing the invoices that come in for the amount that's there. So for the person who wrote this question, is it going to be each time an invoice is submitted for that amount against that one particular PO, that is what will be sent in?
Hey, Carla, it was Rocky, me. So the PO freeze of math is like $100,000, and the first prepayment is 20% of that. So the invoice that comes in is 20%. The entire the entire purchase order is more, and so they can't pay off the entirety of the line, just like we have now. I don't know how is Oracle planning to handle those.
So your PO should be set up to reflect those charges. So if it's like for one, and let's say it's for like $1 million, and then you're only going to pay 20% of that. I'm about to start lying, I think. Let me check back and circle back to you for that, because for the one line, it should be set up for the difference to pay. I see the person's comment about amending for a small amount. What are you considering a small amount? We have $100, that's the threshold. But if it's anything over that, then it's going to be returned back where you'll have to amend. Unfortunately, $100 is the threshold. So I understand you're paying to be like $102 and I have to amend it. But at that point, your PO didn't match the invoice that was coming in. Let's move on to the survey results, and then we will circle back at the end for questions. Okay. So for the survey results that we sent out, thank you very much for those who completed it. It was fiscal officers, business officers, people who submit requisitions, and others. From that feedback, we want to determine what is working, what is not. Have you share some of your pain points related to the invoicing unit, explain, adjust, and improve our services, because the goal is to better serve you. We want to, there's no joy in sending back invoices. Ideally, we want them to be processed the first time they came in and have it keep moving. Unfortunately, that can't happen if it's missing information or information isn't listed on the PO. Here is a sample, or not a sample, here's a list of the invoice questions that we were submitted to people. Invoicing policies and procedures are easy to find, accessible to me. Light yellow, strongly agree. Muted yellow, disagree. Neutral is the blue. Agree, darker blue. Strongly agree, lighter blue. So for the different questions that were asked, overall invoicing is doing fine, but We did get coloring in the different parts to say, hey, I have some concerns. Do keep in mind the survey questions, depending on when someone got the survey of how they were feeling, if they didn't get a response quick enough or things weren't altered for them to do, is how I think this was kind of graded. However, we're here, we understand there's things that we recognize that we're doing good work, but you guys have some questions or concerns of things that want to be questioned or want to be improved. Knowledgeable and helpful. Again, very good to see that we stayed in the neutral or agree category. So good job, invoicing staff. So at this point, I'm going to have Marina go over some of the survey comments and pains that were addressed.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I missed a bit of the beginning because I was having issues, but okay. So these are some of the survey comments that we received. I'll just let you read through them, but a big takeaway from the comments was communication. Departments, people submitting invoices, they really want to have an avenue to be able to reach invoicing staff if they have questions about invoices, you know, like little quick questions, or it could be a more complex issue, but these are just some of the comments. And I know sometimes it seems like, oh, it's a mystery who's processing these invoices, where do I go for help? So we will be launching a Microsoft Teams chat, just a place where you can quickly pop in, ask a question and get it answered, just in a quick manner, instead of going, we might send you to AP Help or somewhere else if it's more complex, if it doesn't belong with us, but we did want somewhere where people can just go and ask their quick question, get something resolved quickly, and find answers to the questions that they have. So we will be launching that, and we'll let you know more about it once we have set that up. So
keep in mind the Teams link setup will be for invoicing. So it'll be a means to be able to reach us directly for an invoicing question. We may have to have you create a ticket if it's something more complex. However, that'll be your means to be launched probably sometime in December before we go live in Oracle so that we can be reached.
We have a question. Is there going to be any chance there will be an invoicing Slack group as well? So definitely not opposed to the form of communication. I think since we're sort of piloting this program within our organization, we're going to move forward with the teams, but you know, we'll see how it works. Again, not opposed to other suggestions or other avenues of communication, but we'll see how Teams works first, and hopefully we'll have success with that. Was that all the
KFS?
Carla? I'm sorry, was that all the comments that you wanted to go through, or Marina?
that's all I had. I think just to reiterate, for moving on to Oracle, about making sure your invoices are one PDF attachment, everything you need in one attachment. That's just the big thing that I see going forward for me.
With the as pertaining to this PowerPoint presentation, did we get through all those comments, Carla?
Yes.
Okay.
Did we want to go back and re-see some of them, or
I just wanted to make sure, you know, I want to sort of reiterate what was already said. You could just go to the comments itself, not this. Yeah, let's go past the survey. So again, you know, the overlying theme here is the communication and the perceived difficulty of reaching somebody within the invoicing team, and we hear that and we understand that. Now there's reasons, right? There's reasons why in the past where it may have been difficult to reach somebody, but we also understand the necessity. And you know, for us to pilot sort of this program, we think will help improve that line of communication. But you know, yeah, if we look at some of these comments here, we also feel really good about what our team is doing today. You know, we have made some very, very good strides in the amount of time it takes us to process the requests. And, you know, Carla said it best in the beginning of this presentation, you know, give us a little grace here as we, you know, go into Aggie Enterprise. It's going to be a learning curve for all of us. We are very confident in the testing that we've done, in the process that we have in place. But as anybody knows, when you move into a new system, there's going to be bumps along the road. So, you know, for us, it's all hands on deck. And, you know, use the resources that we have. Our communications team with Crystal and Jim. We have some great information on our web pages. We continue to ask to reference those. And, you know, get a really, you know, as best of an understanding as you can before we move into January 1st. Okay, so Carla, did you, let's take a look at some of the chat in the meeting.
So I was reading the question where someone said, I run a small pharmacy and pay invoices for pharmacy drugs. Currently, the division assists me with PO balances. Who will help me in the future? My PO has reached its limit. At that point, that would be your account manager, I believe, or your finance manager who's in your department.
Yep. Yeah. Okay,
January
hello, coming January, since there will be a backlog, what is the plan and how soon we can see the payment out? 3 to 5 days was mentioned. Is that the case for the backlog also?
3 to 5 days is the response for our time for processing invoices. For payments, that depends on the payment terms of how your PO was set up for that invoice to be paid.
Correct. How about if we have a rush payment request? Still send the invoice to invoicing@ucdavis.edu, or will rush payments be handled differently?
Your invoice will still all have to go to invoicing@ucdavis.edu, but there will be a form on our website that you would have to complete with the required information of the details for the rush. Is that a rush payment where the check will be returned to the department? Is it going to be FedEx to the vendor? The details of what needs to happen for that rush payment will have to be identified and completed on the form and attached with your invoice submission.
Unless I missed it, you guys haven't answered Tim Belding's question. I think he's posted it a couple times.
Tim Dalton, sorry.
Okay, so in KFS, we can adjust the accounting on a PREC to be different from the purchase order. Can this still be done in Aggie Enterprise?
Can it be done by who?
Anyone. I mean, so I work for CPE. And we create POs for instructors, for vendor instructors all the time that are used across the entire division. And so our process is to create like basically a default account on the PO, because potentially any team across our division could use that instructor, and that would change the accounting that would be needed for that particular payment. Is there a mechanism for that system in Aggie Enterprise? Because if my concern is that we use a default account of the PO in Aggie Enterprise, we send it to you guys to pay, you're going to pay it to the default account, right? I mean, I would just assume that. But is there a mechanism for us to communicate to you, hey, it needs to be on a different account than what's in the purchase order? Because like now I can create a PREC and do that on my own.
You can do the prereq, which will create the PO, and then the processor will pay the invoice against that particular PO line. Let's assume it's a one-line PO, and the funding that's aligned with that will come there. So then you find out later that particular service was to be utilized from a different funding source that needs to be paid. It would have, at that point, the invoice has been paid. It's the equivalent to a current day GEC of how to move it to the account you need it to be moved to.
Right, but right now, like I get the invoice from a vendor and I know what account it needs to be paid to. I can go into KFS myself, create the PREC like the payment request against the PO, adjust the accounting in the payment request, and then it hits the ledger on that account. But because
Mhm.
invoicing is centralized now, is there a way for me to submit an invoice and have it be paid to an account different than the purchase order?
Yes, you'd have to list it. That's all part of your PDF-1 file, or even on your invoice, chart of account changed to bold as can
Okay.
be, so it could be updated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see here. The questions keep flowing in. Okay. Is there any verbiage in the email submitted to the invoicing email address visible to the invoicing team? If not, should a department have notes about an invoice? How should that be communicated?
No. So what happens is when you have your invoice, and let's say it's a vendor submitted invoice, it'll just be the invoice that comes in. That's why if there's information on that you need to relay should be entered in on the invoice or attached, you're creating your file, combining your files into one PDF to then put a note on there so that it'll be looked at and seen. It isn't a way like current day when you send your invoicing to invoicing@ucdavis.edu, it comes into our RT system and there's an ability to write notes. There is not that in Aggie Enterprise. You would have to write your information and attach it to the invoice submission in the file that you're sending in.
Okay, if the vendor is
is-
about payment, is there a way to identify that payment was paid in full and where it was sent?
Yes, so since invoicing will be 100% centralized, we've taken away the ability for the departments to process, but you will all have access to be able to view the invoice. And then when you're able to view it, you can see it was paid, the amount was paid, the date, the means of how it was paid. So that's a search factor that each person in the department that will have access can have and see.
Okay. Question.
Wait, somebody put, right, wait, I'm confused on that one because we currently cannot add a different account. You cannot add a different account when you do it. So you've done your requisition, your PO has been created, and that's your funding line that's there. And Aggie Enterprise, when the invoice comes in for the PO, it's going to change from funding line to distribution combination. And as the processor, we have the ability to be able to open up and see the distribution line, and that's where we're able to amend it.
Okay, so what he asked was, so you're saying there's going to be some way for, because currently, like Jim just put in the chat, if we wanted to change the account on the invoice, besides the account that's on the PO, we cannot do that. We have to do an amendment on the PO and change the account before we submit the invoice. But you're saying that's not true, that we will be able to, you will be able to change the account?
I do have the ability to change the account. Carla Marcano, manager of invoice processing.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a role factor under me. However, it's not a standard where it should be the exception and not the standard.
Okay. And how would we go about doing that if that were to come up? Where would
Contact me.
Oh, just email you and ask you to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. Just,
I don't want to put that into the masses where my emails, I'm spending the day responding to amend people's POs.
Right.
So it's one of those kind of like by exception, we'll cater to that. But
Okay.
Ideally, you should amend your PO to the funding line that you want to be used to pay that particular invoice.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, Carla, because that kind of clarifies. Like right now, at current state at CPE, is we don't send invoices to AP all the time, and we
Mhm.
process them internally on a PREC, and we change the accounting all the time using
Mhm.
the current system. So what you're saying is in the new state is you would not want us to do that, because I'm going to tell you it would be a lot. Like we change accounting from on POs on an invoice by invoice basis all the time. We do not amend the PO. We just change the account on the PREC and it goes through just fine current state.
yeah. And Tim,
Because your requisition creates your PO.
Right.
No, I get what you're saying, Tim. I know
Yeah.
exactly. I know
Okay.
that departments do exactly what you're saying. And the answer is yes, we do not want to operate that way going forward.
That's
Got
correct.
it. Thank you, Martin.
You'd be better off changing it after the fact, using like Carla mentioned, whatever the new GEC is, moving your funding that way.
Sure. That's kind of where we had come to. I just wanted to clarify in this meeting from AP what your perspective was, and I'm glad that we got it clear. Thanks.
So yeah, Tim, right? We're all on the same page here. You aren't able to do that in Oracle.
Okay, good. Because we would do it a lot in our
Yeah.
current state.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, let's get back here to the chat. Looks like, thank you, Mike and
Matt.
Jim. Looks like questions are being answered. Okay, so those ones seem to be getting answered. Okay, so if we can't process a change order sooner than the invoice processing time, besides requesting AP to make the exception for us to change the COA, we can also process a JE to change the COA.
What is it, JE?
I-
Journal?
Journal. I'm assuming it's the journal entry. Not quite sure, Tiffany, with your question.
Hey,
Unless-
Barton, it's Monique. So you can, but it's going to be limited who has JE access. Just so everyone knows, your school is determining who's going to have access, and it's going to be very limited. This is Monique from School of Vet Med Teaching Hospital, by the way.
Thank you, Monique.
Right. So I believe the GE is equivalent to our current state in KFS, the GEC or the DI. So most of our fiscal officer will have this role. And also they are the ones processing the GEC DIs to update the posting currently in KFS to change the accounts, sub-accounts, etc. And so this is equivalent to the JE in the IG enterprise. So that's why I was just wondering if we couldn't process all those change order, which will be really time consuming, I believe. And also we don't want to request the exception, on a regular basis. That's why I was just wondering, could we process the JE to change the account strings, like what we are doing now in KFS using the GEC?
I don't have the answer for that. That more falls under accounting.
Yeah, and I can second what Monique said earlier. This is Rocky from EQ. The access to create a journal entry, which is previously in today's world, both the JV and a GEC, is going to be narrowed down very strictly into a few people for whatever departments. And obviously, the idea is to not use it as the fallback position to correct accounting things, but to do the accounting thing correctly from the get-go is what I would imagine is the idea. So I don't know, Tiffany, who in your department will have access to it, but they're narrowing it on purpose.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think I could further address this question to the central accounting.
Thank you.
Hey, some great questions. Anybody else have questions out there?
This is Rocky. I don't have a question, but I do have a suggestion for the departments. This happens currently. If you find that your invoices are often returned because freight wasn't accounted for, in Oracle, will they be able to put in an estimated freight amount to, like let's say they estimate freight is $50 and it comes in as $30 or $57. Is that close enough, or does, what happens to them if they do put in a guesstimate for their freight?
So at that point, it would still fall under the $100 threshold that we'll be able to go ahead and add it in.
Okay, in that case, I do suggest that departments try and scrutinize from their vendor or their invoice if they think they're going to have to pay shipping to make, because if it ends up getting waived, because a lot of times invoice or quotes will have the freight, and then the buyer is able to negotiate that away, or some such thing happens. Anyway, the freight's not ever paid. And so I don't know if you guys will have that ability in Oracle, but I would imagine if they decide to waive the freight, you know, let's say it was $500 and now the vendor's actual invoice says, nope, no freight, you just don't pay that line, right? So that's not as much of a hardship on the department. Then I never thought that there would be freight. Now there is freight and my invoice has to come back. You know, if they put it in to begin with, is what I'm saying, and it doesn't get paid, that's not a hardship, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great point.
Anything else?
Well, other than the prepayment, because right now we do want for equipment related POs, of course, we do ask the departments to lay out their requisition like the quote is, so that it's easier on supply chain to both look at it, review it, and then pay it. However, let's say they have a 3-line PO and it's going to be, you know, partial prepayment. I guess we have to figure out how, it's 30% of each line is how it would go right now, but maybe there is a prepaid line, you know, line 1 is the 30% payment or something. So you guys can let us know how because we'll do it however you want to see it, but I don't remember now, other than construction in progress, that's how they're gonna get paid, something like that.
Yes, thank you, Rocky. I will ping you offline and we'll chat. I don't want to say something and it be wrong. So let me confirm to make sure for that, how it gets paid about. There's been testing and there's been changes. So let me make sure on accuracy before I respond to you back on that.
Sure thing.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in. We all really do appreciate everybody's time. Carla, thank you for putting this presentation together. We will notify everybody when our Microsoft Teams help group will be available. We're excited to see hopefully some communication improvement through that channel. And you can always reach us. You can reach Carla directly, Marina, myself, if you have any questions in regards to invoicing. And if there isn't anything else, I think we could wrap this up. So thank you all for your time. We all really appreciate it.